The one question that loomed over everything this offseason for the Arizona Diamondbacks was Jordan Montgomery's future. Signed that 2-year deal last spring. Didn't have a great year. ERA over 6. Got removed from the rotation. Ken Kendrick in the offseason takes full responsibility for the contract, basically just throws Jordan Montgomery straight under the bus. You don't hear owners do things like that. So we went into the offseason. Where's he going to go? What are they going to get back for him? How much of the contract are they going to have to eat? That's how we framed the conversation. There was very rarely a conversation that included Jordan Montgomery being back on this team. I sort of made the case of why you would bring him back if you chose to do so. You would point to the fact that he didn't have a full spring, that he signed late, he had to start the year with some minor league starts. I tried to present the case as to why you would want to bring him back, that you would bet on a rebound year from Jordan Montgomery. But all in all, I never truly expected him to still be on this team. Yet I don't know if you've looked around camp recently or if you've checked out the Diamondbacks roster, but Jordan Montgomery's still here. He's back in camp. He's answering awkward questions from reporters about Ken Kendrick's comments. It's awkward for the reporter to have to ask that question. It's probably awkward for Jordan Montgomery to have to answer it. He's answering questions about comments the owner made about his poor performance, and that's the guy who signs his check. It's just weird, okay? The guy that signs your checks goes out there and says, bad signing, bad decision, that's on me. Welcome back, Jordan. You're back. It's weird. I really didn't think that we would get to this point. I did not think we would still be sitting here talking about Jordan Montgomery's role on this team. And maybe because of that weirdness, because of that awkwardness that exists, that's the reason why Jordan Montgomery's name is still being thrown out there when you see these stories of names that could still get traded before the season begins, names that could be moved during spring training. Jordan Montgomery's name right there at top of the list. And again, it makes sense. Think about where we ended the year. Think about those comments. It makes sense why that would still be a possibility. It's kind of rare for us to have this situation play out exactly the way that it did. The moment those comments are made, you fully expect that no matter what, Jordan Montgomery is not going to be on this roster, be with this team. Yet here we are. So we've gotten all the way to February 14th. And we are still talking about ways out of this situation for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, removing Jordan Montgomery from the roster probably makes it easier to determine who's going to be in the rotation. Yesterday, we told you there's 7 guys for 5 spots. If all of a sudden it becomes 6 guys for 5 spots because Jordan Montgomery's not here, Ryan Nelson has options. It's not really truly a competition at that point. You know who your 5 guys are. But I think there's a very important thing that we're missing right now. And that important thing that we're missing right now is that because we've gotten to this point, because we are at February 14th and Jordan Montgomery is in camp and is on this team and spring training has begun and pitchers and catchers are reporting and other position players are starting to show up and we're moving closer and closer to the season beginning. Right now, on February 14th, Jordan Montgomery actually helps the Diamondbacks more by being on the roster. What do I mean by that? Well, what was the intent behind trading Jordan Montgomery in the first place? Had a bad year, yes. Didn't pitch well. You wanted to kind of clean up your rotation, free up a spot, right? But you moved him out of the rotation in the second half. He pitched poorly. I get that. That's one of the reasons why you move on from him. But the other reason was a $20 million salary that you had to carry on your books. That money now landlocked, can't be used elsewhere. That $20 or so million was limiting what the Diamondbacks could spend this offseason. The whole idea of trading him and eating the money was, well, now you can take that money that you are saving and go sign a reliever, or put that money in the pool to sign a bat. Folks, it's February 14th. Alex Bregman just signed. Kenley Jansen signed last week. You point to me the reliever that the Diamondbacks need to go spend money that they would save on Jordan Montgomery's contract. Those big names don't exist anymore. And I know the Diamondbacks made a move today, picked up a reliever. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the program. But I'm talking the big ticket items in the offseason. None of those guys are still left. The big bats, all are gone. And so, yeah, maybe Ken Kendrick just wants to make this trade to get that money off the books and save $8 million because the team's already operating at the highest payroll that we've ever seen. I get that. But the purpose when we were crafting potential trades for Jordan Montgomery was how much of the contract could you eat to free up resources to do something else? If you traded the contract right now and you had to pay all of it to move Jordan Montgomery off your roster, it doesn't help you at all. I would rather have Jordan Montgomery if I'm going to pay him the $20 million. And if I'm going to pay half the contract, if I'm going to pay $10 million of it, if I'm going to pay $12 million of it, I can't now go and use that money right now. Maybe you trade him and that money becomes available to you at the trade deadline. Maybe that's a rosy outlook on this. But the hay is kind of in the barn on this one. If you were going to move him, it was going to be under the guise of freeing up resources. Unless the owner is mandating you free up resources from a budget perspective, there's nothing to free up those resources for. There's no $10 million reliever that's still hanging out there for you to go get. There's no bat that if you offered him $15 million is going to walk through that door and lengthen your lineup and make the Diamondbacks a better offense. Those players don't exist anymore. They existed throughout the offseason. They don't exist as we sit here right now, a week away from the first spring training game for the Diamondbacks. So in a very weird way, Jordan Montgomery helps the Diamondbacks more now by being on this roster. He helps them more being a candidate as a long man out of the bullpen. He helps them more as a candidate as a depth reliever if some injuries hit their rotation. He serves this team better. He is able to help this team better being on the roster rather than being off the roster. So all these stories that we see talking about Jordan Montgomery still being a trade candidate, still possibly leaving, I don't buy it anymore. I think we're past the window where that made sense. We're past the window where the impact of moving from Jordan Montgomery or moving on from Jordan Montgomery would be adding to this roster. Now, moving on from Jordan Montgomery would hurt your roster. It would hurt the current 2025 Diamondbacks roster. He has a role on this team now. Long man, depth starting pitching option if injuries hit the rotation. Off this team, he does nothing than maybe clean up the budget for Ken Kendrick. That's it. Could that still be an outcome? Absolutely. But the on-the-field product, it's better if Jordan Montgomery is here.